That's right.
All right. I guess we could do microphones, or can you? Yeah, because everybody's back or whatever. Plus, we're recording these sessions anyway. So, welcome to this session. I appreciate you all being here. John Hall, unfortunately, can't be here, but it's working with the media and PR agencies, which is super important. But I do have the amazing Deanna Fox here, who I've known for a long time. Deanna Fox is currently an associate partner at PC Public Affairs, running the firm's media relations practice. She was a journalist and communications consultant for 15 years before joining the firm and extensively covering the beverage and craft beer industry. I know that personally, Deanna wrote for a lot of publications about beer and about New York State beer. And what I loved about Deanna is the fact that she wasn't looking for just to write about beer. She would call me and look for the unique angle, something that nobody's like talking about, and really thoughtful you are about beer and about the beer community. And what was great for me as the current executive director of the association was that I got somebody to write about beer. You know, we're getting in the media, right? It was super important to us. I can't, you know, we can only do so much on Facebook and other things. And it's like, how do I get New York State beer in the media? So Deanna was always forefront in my mind because she was looking for, you know, the one story you didn't do is that there are actually 2 ordained ministers that are brewers. That
I know, you'll never let me forget. That's the one I need to do.
That's a unique angle. So anyway, the whole topic of this. And so John Hall unfortunately couldn't be here. For those that are you all the members who are on our Facebook page, brewery Facebook? All right, so once in a while I post something from John Hall, who's looking for stories for his Wine Enthusiast magazine. You need to use that, and we can talk about that later. So I'm going to sit in for John. I was supposed to moderate, but I'm going to sit in for John. For those that don't know my background, I'm a recovering TV producer for 20 years. I used to do broadcast TV shows, Home and Garden Television. I got into beer because I've traveled a lot, and I pitched 4 beer TV shows, and I found this young guy in Delaware who wanted to do TV. His name was Sam Calagione, and it was right when he first started, and all that. So I fell in love with craft beer. So I have a media background too, so I love mixing the two. So I'll sit in, but I'm gonna let Deanna, she's smarter than me, do most of the talking. And so I guess the first question is, and I'm sure you're all interested in here, you all wanna kind of promote your breweries. What kind of things would interest you when you were a writer to write about beer? Like, give them some ideas of what they need to be doing.
Yeah, so things that were always interesting to me were stories that had more application than just to an audience that was interested in beer. It's easy to engage with a beer fan about beer, but the goal in working with media, doing any kind of public relations or marketing effort is to grow your audience, not just play to the audience that you already have. Oh my God, they're busting down the door. They just have to come in. So enticing. Perfect. So any story that could be applicable to an audience outside of beer as well was always really interesting. So if it had to do with business, if it had to do with agriculture, if it had to do with tourism and travel, any kind of trend related to another industry was always really fascinating. But then of course you do have, you know, the dedicated beer journalism reader, beer drinker, who was interested in the newest style, the newest trend, things like that. So it was always interesting having to kind of walk the line between just writing a trends piece about beer and making it applicable to a publication like a daily newspaper or a TV news broadcast, so that people weren't immediately tuning out from it.
So you all are in here for a reason, and we have probably a lot to talk about. But like, what is it? Why are you here? What's the interest for you? What is it that are you not? You feel like you're not getting enough? Getting into the media, not getting written about enough, or anybody want to?
Yeah, I guess just some like best practices as far as sending press releases or reaching out to media. The ways that people, you know, I mean, every individual wants to be contacted in a different way, but if there's, you know, kind of like rule.
Yeah, I can give you some best practices for that. Is that kind of what everybody else is really interested into, kind of the logistics of how to make media work for you? What did you have?
Yeah, topics of content that span off of beer. So it could be related to your brewery, but what kind of stories? Is it the stories behind brewer, the other people that are on the team, something that lines up with like their values, what kind of content would you find to be most interesting that you'd like to see?
Right. So those are both really great questions. So I think probably the best place to start with that is to talk about where media relations fit into general marketing schematics. So there's kind of this new thought among marketers called, well, it's not really new, but they gave it a name at least. So it's called PESO, P-E-S-O. So there's kind of 4 segmentations of your marketing plan. P is for paid, E is for earned, S is for shared, and O is for owned. So paid media is anytime you're transferring dollars for influence. So an ad, any of the ads that are in a publication like this or on TV, or now even you can get local ads for really cheap to run on streaming services, which is really interesting. E, earned media, is what I do. So that's anything that's related to the media. So that's trading your expertise essentially for content. So anytime that you would engage with a reporter or a social media influencer, because that's a whole other thing, that's your earned media. Generally speaking, earned media is worth more than paid because, your audience isn't dumb. They're going to know that, anybody, there's no filter on who can buy an ad as long as it's not inappropriate. So it's not really that there's any particular level of trust instilled into you by that media organization. They're just taking your money. But if they're going to write about you, that would allude to the fact that they think that you're an expert or have something interesting to say. So depending on which PR practitioner you might work with, they generally either do whatever the ad value for the segment or the article that you're in, multiply that by 4 to 7 times, and that's generally what that article was worth. So, it's a little bit arbitrary, but PR practitioners have to make a living somehow, I guess. So, shared is anytime you take that article and you share it to an audience that you already have. So anytime you post it on Facebook, anytime you post it on Instagram, etc. And then owned is anything that is native to your brand. So if you create some sort of beer style guide, or you create a webinar, or you offer a recipe for what to use with your beer, and people are Googling that and searching for it, but it's yours and you own it, that's owned media. So those are the 4 segmentations. I'm going to start with your question about how to create a story that's interesting to people. You always have to figure out what the story is. A lot of times you're going to fail if you just reach out to a journalist and you're like, hey, we're making a Vienna lager, and I'd really like you to try it. Nobody's going to pick that up. If you're saying we're making a Vienna lager because we are working, with a really interesting grain farm that's creating, a malt for us. We're working, Vienna lager's having a renaissance because of XYZ reasons. Tie it in. You have to mine the data. What's the data around the story that you're trying to create? Do a little research and figure out, is it the 300th anniversary of the first Vienna lager known to man? That's cool. Is it, is Vienna lager the top 10? Is it the fastest growing beer style in America? That's cool. So anytime there's a big arc storyline that can be brought down to the local level, that's probably the best place to start from. Finding what that big arc, the big story is, who the players are. Your brewery obviously would be a player because you're making it. From there, I would say, as far as like your logistics go, and there's more to that about like best practices about finding your story, but as to the logistics, if you're just pitching, if you have a story idea and you're just pitching a story, the best thing that you can do is pitch it as an exclusive to one writer that you know, or journalist, so somebody in the media. It could be somebody that's creating a beer blog, running a beer blog. It could be a newspaper writer. It could be somebody at your local, I guess everyone here's from New York State, so everybody has like a Spectrum outlet, Spectrum news outlet. So is there a segment that they do on the weekends about food and beverage? And you can interrupt me anytime.
No, you're going.
Okay.
I'm totally not prepared because John Hall is really, really good, and Deanna's usually used to doing this with him. So you go, run, and I'll try to come up with questions.
John is fantastic. John Hall should be at the top of your pitch list. If he's not, he should be the guy that you're talking to first.
And to that point,
Yep.
like he literally will reach out to me and say, "Here's a link. I want to hear from everybody." Like, just it's like, why wouldn't you like send
Right.
somebody like him? And he's so well respected in the industry, and he's so smart about beer and wine and everything else. Take advantage of that. Like so.
Yeah, make the connection. Just figure out who that person is near you. Start local, and then you can build up from there. If you don't already have a base of media that you can use as leverage to show that you actually know what you're talking about, start local, and then build to regional, and then build to national. If you just have a story that you want to promote, I would create your top 10 list of people that you'd like to share that story with. Your top one, offer it as an exclusive. Be like, John Hall, I would love for you to write about this new program that we have, this new beer, whatever. Offer it as a story. Offer it as part of a roundup. Ask him, we're just going to use John as our base example for today. Ask John what he's doing. If he's, for wine enthusiasts, is he doing, a drinking guide for American beer styles? Something. Pitch your beer in that regard. If you're doing an event, there is a real process to that. So the first thing that you would do is write a media advisory. Does anybody know what that is? No. Okay, perfect. A media advisory. And I have a whole stack of business cards I can give you, and then I can send you examples of this stuff if you want. A media advisory is a very short who, what, when, where, why. You're going to make sure that your name or whoever's in charge of marketing, probably you are, probably small operation. That'll be at the top. Maybe you slap your logo on it so that it's immediately identifiable. You give it a headline, X brewery is hosting some sort of festival this weekend. Who? Your brewery. What? The festival. Where? Your location. Plus the time. Why? Why is it important? Maybe no more than 100 words on why it's important. And then you're going to send that out as a BCC. You're going to send it to yourself, and you're going to BCC every person you can think of that might have some ability to share or influence that story. If your event's on a Saturday, you're going to send that on Monday. You're going to send it again on Wednesday. And then you're going to write a press release. And a press release is your opportunity to write the story that you want a newspaper journalist, TV reporter, whatever, to write. So the big secret here is that nobody writes anymore. There are no journalists. We're all broke, so we all leave. There's very few people like John Hall who actually can make a living writing about beer. So if you write a really great press release that kind of looks like a newspaper article or is something that would be easy to read on camera, there's a really good chance you're going to get it picked up because producers and editors don't have time to go and to basically write the story themselves. If they have a hole in the paper, if they have a hole in their news segment, they're going to pick it up and they're going to run it. If you can include a link that has, they call them assets, so any kind of video, beer labels, pictures of your brewery, pictures of past events, pictures of your beer, put those in there. And you're going to send that the morning of either, if it's an all-day event on a Saturday, you're going to send it Friday night. If it's, a Friday night, you're going to send it Friday morning. Generally, 12 hours before the start of your event is when you want to send it. And then you're basically going to rewrite that press release in past tense with any assets that you took from that event, and you're going to send it maybe that night after your event or the next day. And that's kind of like your best practice. I know I just threw a lot at you, so definitely ask questions if you have questions. But that's generally the timeline for how to work with the media. Yeah.
So we were talking a lot about John because John's supposed to be where I'm sitting right now, and it's John. Does anybody know who John is? All right, yeah, so most of you do. So those of you who don't, it's Holl, by the way, if you want to look him up and you don't know him. But he is the editor of All About Beer. He's got 3 podcasts, Drink Beer, Think Beer, Steal This Beer, and BYO Nano Podcast, right? So John Hall is clearly an influencer. I guess in your mind, who else would you think they should kind of know about maybe on a national level? Is there anybody else like a John Hall that you would connect with and they should think about?
Yeah, Karen Newman still writes about beer once in a while. What's Josh's last name?
Bernstein.
Bernstein.
Yeah.
Josh Bernstein.
It says Anne, is that what you're going to say?
Yeah.
Kate Bernard.
Oh, Kate,
Kate's
definitely.
great.
I don't know
Yeah,
Kate.
heck yeah, Kate Bernard.
Kate's awesome.
Yeah. So there you go. There's 4 right there.
Yeah.
What was Brian's last name?
Rock.
Ryan Roth. Wow, I haven't seen him in
Yeah,
forever.
neither have I. But he still reaches out to me once in a while. Yeah.
Yeah, there's also Courtney Eisen.
Oh, Courtney's great.
Yeah, there you go. Hope you're writing these names down.
But honestly, a great thing to do if you all have Instagram accounts, just look up #beer and see who comes up as like a top account. Because they probably, so that's the other thing you need to keep in mind too. Excuse me. There's journalists and then there's influencers. And today, just because of the way media works, they often cross streams. They're often, a journalist can also be an influencer. So the big difference is a journalist is not ever going to take your money directly, but an influencer will. So that's kind of the biggest difference. And an influencer often becomes the person directly pitching your product to their audience for you. There isn't usually a lot of real journalism that will go into the things that they're promoting, and that's fine. You know, they have their own, you know, part in the media ecosystem as well, the marketing ecosystem. But a journalist, if it's somebody trusted and well-known, people are going to follow them. So they will probably take a picture and put it up, because content is king, just building content. And that's also another thing. Part of the PESO, P-E-S-O, is developing your own content that people can pick up. So that's where a lot of journalists are also finding stuff. That's always where I found information and inspiration for stories, was to just keep track. Because a lot of times you guys are doing cool stuff and you don't even know it's like cool from a media perspective. And so 75% of my stories were me reaching out to somebody in your position to find that information and to tell you that it's something I'd like to write about. Maybe only 25% was ever pitched to me.
When you look for content, when you said, are you looking for written content or video content or both?
For me, it didn't really matter. For your general public, I think media is probably more influential. Video is probably more influential, just because of the way that the algorithm for social media works, people's attention spans. But it's also extremely difficult to be producing that kind of content when you're a small brewery trying to make good beer and keep up with legislation and, you know, processes and everything else. So there's a lot of great resources online where you can find how to create content from one piece of video. You can take screenshots from that, and then you have, you know, your photos, how you can manipulate things so that they work on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, and YouTube, and every other platform that there is. Pinterest is a big one. About what was your question?
That was the question,
Oh,
in terms of
what
like
is
when you were
cool?
looking,
Right,
like
what
when
is
you were actually writing about beer, and now that you're with a PR agency, what are you looking for? Is it written or is it video?
Yeah.
Like I think of Rocky, like they do a whole video series all the time. They're really good at video
Nice.
and good at content. Is anybody else doing that sort of? You are, yeah. There you go.
Oh.
So yeah.
So you should just be up here talking about this with
I
us
know.
then.
Yeah.
You
Take my
know,
place.
yeah. What's interesting? So beer styles are always interesting. Always post about the next beer that you're producing, because you're gonna influence and interest a lot of people from that. Because it might be something where, people don't want, if you're doing a magazine like this, there's gonna be a couple of reported features. So a reported feature is something where you're probably interviewing like 3 sources, so maybe your brewery and 2 others, and you're really trying to build like a full circle look at a particular issue. But that's hard for people to read. People don't have
Sitting right here. Good point.
people don't have a lot of attention span anymore. So you fill up the space by just doing like listicles. So like here, top 10 breweries to visit in New York State. Top 10 IPAs to be drinking right now. Any of that stuff. And a lot of times it's just like scrolling, searching IPA and location and scrolling and finding that stuff. That's how a lot of it. But it also doesn't hurt either to just be reaching out to people who are influential in the media, bloggers, podcasters, reporters, producers, social media influencers, and just invite them in for a beer. Just be like, hey, anytime that you got a minute to come in and take a look, beer's on us. And a journalist will probably pay because they're not supposed to take gifts. But, whatever. We're all poor. So we might take it for free. But that's just a great way to stay front of mind. Even if you don't think, keep your expectations realistic. Even if you don't think that anybody's going to pick up this new beer style that you have, still put out a press release and send it. And just stay top of mind. Make it part of your marketing strategy to be putting out maybe 2 press releases a month. Just about, here's our February list of events. Something like that, just so you're staying top of mind. Because if you are always putting your name out there and always marketing yourself, a journalist is going to see that you're really putting in the effort to be known, and you're going to be willing to return the call, to make the time for them, and to help them with their story.
So it's funny, this was sitting right in front of me, and it's kind of really relevant to what we're talking about. I don't know if you, I know some of you aren't from around this area, but True Brew Magazine, I don't know if you're familiar with this at all, but Eric Budrake does this, and he's here running around. But there are so few paper publications like this left, and people do like them. And I forgot the number, but a lot of people pick these up. I know that we buy ads in these, and in return, if I buy like $500 ad, he's done a full-blown article on us, and we've gotten a lot of traction from that. So just on this issue, Speckled Pig has 4 or 5 pages in it, cooking with beer. He does 7 questions with. So he would be a guy that, you just talk to. And it's not that we had to buy an ad. He's given us stuff before, but he's just looking for good content is what he's looking for people to pick this up so he can sell ads to other people because people are picking this up.
He
Right,
has
but-
a website as well.
And the website.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we work there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to ask. These people are also trying. So a lot of times when you see something like this, the person who prints this is the Times Union. And if you're a Times Union subscriber, Times Union is the big Albany newspaper is owned by Hearst. Hearst is the 6th wealthiest family in the U.S. And they own their own winery too. So that if you're a subscriber to the Times Union, you get this as part, not in this form, you get the e-edition. But then you're tapping into an audience that normally wouldn't pick this up. You're probably only going to pick this up if you're interested in food and beverage. I don't think you're going to pick it up as a general interest kind of thing. But they have to make money. So most of the time they're going to reach out to you, unless they're really asking for something specific about a story, they're going to reach out to you for money, ask you to run an ad. Yeah.
Just wanted to mention to you that True Brew, you can get on their distributor list and they'll drop off,
Yeah.
you'll get copies for your tap room. And we've had a lot of customers that really enjoy picking these up.
Cool. Yeah. But don't be afraid to ask for, so there's a line of delineation. There's advertising and there's editorial. Editorial is the stuff you don't pay for. Editorial is the earned stuff. The ad is the paid stuff, obviously. But then there's this weird thing called an advertorial, which is blending the two. And they'll write whatever they want you to write, but it looks like native content. It looks like a piece of journalism. So don't be afraid to ask the question, do I have to pay for this? Is it contingent on me buying $250 of ad space? And then see where they go. And if they say, yeah, you have to pay, then all right, that's your decision. But you never know. I don't think they get asked that question very often. But most of the times if you see something like this, it's related to whatever major newspaper is in your area. So, the Demon Chronicle, what's in Syracuse now? Post-Standard. So don't be afraid to ask that question.
Do you have questions?
I had an experience 3 years ago, the first day of shutdown at my old job, when a TV reporter came into our bar, shoved a camera in my face, interviewed me for something, and then walked away. So to this day, I don't know who it was, how to find that content. What sort of questions should I have been asking if, there is media at our facility, or what can I do to protect the business, or what should I keep, on the DL? Just sort of how to engage with the media maybe when you aren't expecting it. If someone comes up with a like a flip notebook asking questions? Like, how do you protect yourself in the business and sell your business in the best way?
So I'm going to work backwards from your questions, I guess. The PR practitioner in me is going to say whatever information is proprietary to you or just feels uncomfortable to talk about is what you shouldn't talk about. And if they ask you a question that you don't want to answer, the best way to respond is to say, I'm not sure how to answer that. Let me follow up with you. And then that's going to force them to actually give you their contact information. But the best thing, if somebody just shows up in your bar, your brewery like that, and starts asking you a question, ask them for their press credentials. They should have them on their person. Or you can just say, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't catch who you're with, or your name. And, just being polite generally is the best approach. Keeping in mind that it might not be aggression, that might be pure oversight and a rush. Most newscasts have, I don't know, what is it? Something like 180 minutes of news to fill a day. And they can repeat a lot of that content, but, it's a lot. And then newspapers have to produce not everybody produces a paper daily anymore, but a lot of them do. And then a really great thing to have, if you don't have it, take a weekend if you can to bang it out, is to have a media kit. So a media kit is basically a rough overview of who you are and what you're doing. So you should have a quick about section, and this can be like 2 pages, like a front and back, really short thing, or you can spend some time in Adobe or Canva or whatever you use and make something that's like 7 or 8 pages long and looks nice that you can put on your website. So you should have an about page that just tells a little bit about your brewery and why you're doing it. You should have contact information, email, phone number, maybe 2 phone numbers, and then your social media handles. An executive bio, which is just a fancy word for a little bit of information about your key players, your owners, your brewers, that kind of thing. If you have any kind of like quick facts or by the numbers, like this is how much beer we produce a year, this is how long we've been in operation. Really quick informational stuff to put that up. That's good. Any links to past media that you've been involved with, if it's something that you can put on your website or make public somehow that way, if it's a hyperlink, that's great. If you can link to, have a public Dropbox that has some press releases that maybe you've written in the past, that has your assets where they can get your logo and that kind of thing. And yeah, I would say that's probably sufficient for what you're trying to do. And then you can give that to them. If you have maybe 10 hard copies that you keep on hand at all time, you can just go grab one and give it to them. Or you can give them, tell them to go on your website, give them your URL, and they can find it there. And that will give them the information to make sure they're getting the right info about you, because I've also seen that happen a lot, where it's the wrong brewery name, it's wrong details, it's wrong beer styles, that kind of thing.
So a question that you made me think of something, what I've learned the hard way is when you're talking to the media and you're talking to a reporter, and I would like to get your angle on this as well, is anything ever really off the record? So I have once in a while tried to be funny or tried to be like loose or whatever and said something and it comes out in an awkward way or in a weird way. And so I have learned through some of the media that I work with that I trust, like they'll ask me a question that I know they're digging, and I'll say, is this off the record? And they'll say it's completely off the record. And then I'll say something, to that. I would say be very careful. I guess, what advice would you give about that when talking to media?
So in the beer industry, if you talk to John or me or Brian or Josh or Kara, because we know most of you, if you tell us something's off the record, there's like a level of trust there. If you don't know that reporter very, very, very well and have a very close personal relationship with them, it's never off the record. Just don't say it. That's the best way to protect yourself, because that's usually like the juiciest stuff. That's the best stuff. That's going to get people reading, listening, watching. And you don't want that to be the soundbite that's taken and manipulated and turned into something that it wasn't intended to be. So just don't. I mean, you always, you get caught up in the gossip, and sometimes you just get rolling on a topic and you want to say something. Just don't say it. Please don't say it, because nothing's really ever off the record. Period. That's the statement.
I would just add quickly, don't be sarcastic.
Yeah, don't be snarky. Yeah, snarky's not good.
Right. Yeah, try to be funny. Right. Yeah, your sense of humor, especially if they don't know you.
Right, because, and it might translate to the person it might translate to the journalist, but when they write it, it's going to get lost in translation. And when it comes across, on written word or in an audio file, it's not going to carry the same resonance that it did when you provided that quote. So I would avoid that as well. But a really great thing to do, it feels so lame in the moment when you do it. And I do this with all of my clients currently, is just practice. Like, sit down if you know an interview's coming up, come up with a list of questions that you feel like you might be asked and have somebody read them to you and try to answer them. And that actually can help you tremendously. Don't be afraid. Like, if you have notes written down, that's also not a bad thing. It's okay to have notes and, like, refer back to them. I always really liked it when people would do that because I knew that they were taking my time seriously. And then I would, I wouldn't say that I would give them more deference or respect when I was writing it, but I definitely, it put me in check to remember that this is actually somebody's livelihood that they're trying to promote and protect. So, yeah.
And be prepared. Like, sometimes I'm not. And so the last question that usually a reporter or somebody will ask you is there anything I didn't ask you? Is there anything else you want to add? Like, that's a perfect opportunity if you're prepared to, like, get your message out. If you didn't, one way or another, be prepared.
Yeah, yeah. And, you can always, a journalist should provide you with plenty of contact information. You should have their number, their email address, so that if they ask you that question and you don't know, you can follow up with them. But don't wing it either. If you aren't sure about a number or a fact or statistic, just let them know that you'll follow up and then try to follow up relatively quickly. The most lead time I ever really had between producing and publishing a story was generally like at most 10 days, but usually it was like a couple of days. If it's a TV interview, it's probably even less time. So follow up relatively quickly, be respectful of the journalist's time. How much time do we have?
We've got like a little less than 30 minutes.
Okay.
So
I'll take some more questions, and I got more stuff I can share with you. But does anybody else have questions? I want to get back to your question about what makes a story, because I think that's really important. But did anybody else have questions beyond that? Yeah.
We met, I think, last year
Yeah.
at a conference, and you had all kinds of notes and points about how to reach out, like the methods, contact, like what to put in a subject line, all that kind of stuff. We talked about the story about the schooner Apollonia doing the
I knew you were going to ask that because I'm an asshole. That's why that story didn't get published. Because I changed jobs.
So what did we do wrong?
No, you didn't do anything wrong. I'll own that one. That was all me. But at the same time, if you weren't hearing from somebody, move on to the next. Because that is actually that's a fantastic story. That's with Sing Sing, right?
that's it.
Yeah. Let's do a case study on that story. So I still have that pitch. I have it marked as unread so that I can keep coming back to it. And I kept thinking I should pass it on to John. Did you actually reach out to John?
I did reach out to John. Actually, we saw John at
Yeah.
in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
And I spoke to him about it, but at that point, with staffing and stuff, our communications,
Yep.
department kind of was
Yeah.
laid waste.
So I'm going to give John a couple of days because he's dealing with stuff, but I will send that pitch that was sent to me to John and tell him to write the story. So what you did, your beer is produced by wind and ship power, essentially, right? Everything's being transported by the Apollonia.
Yeah.
Right. So you put in your subject line, pitch in big letters, story pitch, and then the topic, which is exactly what you should do. Because if you just write something in the subject, so when you're doing a media advisory, you put media advisory in large letters, colon, the topic of the release, or the media advisory. If it's a press release, you put for immediate release. There also, don't think that anybody's gonna put a boycott on anything or listen to you when you tell them when the story's ready to be run. They're going to just run it whenever they feel like it. So only submit news when you're ready for it to be shared. Put for immediate release, the headline of your media release. When you have a story pitch, big letters, topic of your story. And then, hi, Deanna, we met at the Brewers Conference or whatever. Hi, my name is, I've been following your work. Show that you actually know, you have to know your audience. So you have to know what that journalist wants to write about, what they normally write about. If there's somebody who only writes about wine, even though they're a beverage writer, don't pitch them. Pitch them to somebody who's a beer writer. In your pitch, you gave me the details about what the beer was, why it was unique, why it was different. You were very clear about what the relationship to the ship was, which makes it then not just applicable to beer drinkers, but also people who enjoy sporting, boats, water. It had an ecological, eco-friendly angle to it. And then you follow up, and you did. I'm just an asshole, I swear. This is the only reason why I didn't write that story, because I was at a conflicting time in my life. And you followed up again. Was it Kara that followed up? Caitlin. And then, ultimately, if it doesn't get picked up, like you wrote an amazing pitch, if it doesn't get picked up, send it to the next person.
We just gave you like a bunch of names, right, of people that would probably pick that up. So
Right.
if Deanna, has got a bunch of stories and she's, can't get to it, have those people in your Rolodex, all these people that we just shouted out a little earlier, and send it to them.
But this is also a great example because it's a beer story, but it has so many other angles to it. It's not just applicable to beer publications. So your whole New York City market, anybody in New York City, in that region, Hudson Valley would be big. This is definitely like a wine enthusiast story. It's definitely something that they would write about, but it's also something like Condé Nast Travel would write about, or Travel and Leisure, or the New Yorker, New York Magazine, T Magazine. All of those places would write about it because it has a very broad relevancy and interest on a lot of topics. Include pictures if you can, or like don't try not, just because of the way that email works. The best way to send out press releases is if you have something like Constant Contact or MailChimp. Then you can have your media list right in there. It'll send, it gets to the email filter a little bit better, but try to have like a Dropbox or a Google Drive with all of your assets in it because it doesn't get caught up in the email filter. I'm going to ask you a question in just a second. Yeah, you can put your hand down. I don't want you to get tired. That's the best way to do it. But then the best way to find those journalists, that's the hard part, is finding the people to pitch it to. You can just spend time like on Twitter, looking up the hashtags, looking up the keywords. You can pay a PR practitioner, somebody who does media relations, money to put up to put together a list for you. I want to say that anybody would charge you more than like $1,000 for that list because it really is worth that. But then it's something that you have for a long time. You can keep adding. It's your base. You can remove people from it. You can add people to it. Or you could hire a firm to send that out for you. But I think it's something that you could manage on your own and find those people. But there's a lot of like broad relevancy. So that's how to find the story. You're doing something really unique that I don't think anybody else, do you know anybody else is doing that?
There are
We
other
do.
breweries, but we're
That's actually perfect
we're
then.
doing it with we're also brewing it with all renewable energy.
Because then it's a trend. So now it's just not a profile on one place doing it, it's a trend, which is also really important. A trend is usually 3 or more places doing something. So you can really build it out. So that's more of like a profile. So it's like a 1,500 word feature profile on a trend, which if you were to put it in one of those magazines that I put you, that's got like an earned media value of like dozens of thousands of dollars. So that's a freaking awesome return on investment if you ask me. What was your question?
Just in terms of when you pitch as an exclusive to
Mhm.
one creator, And then things that are time sensitive. Like, what's a reasonable amount of time to give that person to get back to you before you send that to somebody else?
Just a couple of days, like 2 days, 3 days maybe, and tell them like it's time sensitive. Put it in bold, right at the top of your email. In the first few paragraphs of your email, and then follow up if you're not hearing. Be like, hey, I really would love for you to write this story. Here's why, and if you can't, that's cool. I'll pass it on to the next person, and that's usually sufficient. Like just being polite, I think generally works. Yeah. What's up? Did you have is that a stretch or a
stretch? I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry. It's very smooth, by the way. Yeah. All right, if I can go through some more kind of best practices, if that works. So we did talk about like finding the story a little bit. Even if you don't think it's going to get picked up, please just send out the news anyway. Again, it's going to stay top of mind. It's going to keep you relevant, and I think that's probably most important because you can only make so much time to do so much pitching. Once you get your name out there and you really expose yourself, journalists will start looking for you, which is really nice. You kind of hit like a critical mass where it starts to tilt the other way. They remember your name. They're going to keep asking you. I have a dear colleague that I used to work with who was my editor for a while, and it's so infuriating because he goes to the same people all the time. But he goes to those people because he knows that they're always going to give him exactly what he needs. So position yourself that way. Anything that is, if you have, people love like human interest stories. So if you have somebody working in your brewery who's really got a cool background, like, I think the whole like used to be a scientist, now I'm a brewer thing is a little played out. But if you have somebody, if you're doing something with people, with disabilities, for example, or somebody who's got a really interesting backstory, kind of convoluted as to how they got to where they are now. If you're hiring majority of your employees as minorities, women, that's a big thing. Time it to things that are going on. Just Google one of those stupid like days of the year, whatever, national monthly holiday things. Women's History Month, Black History Month, on and on and on. Tie it to, if you can tie it to some sort of holiday or national day of prominence, that's always a good way to get a story. I'm trying to think what else. There's so many different ways, and I think the biggest thing is just being able to figure out how to get beyond the beer scene. I don't think anybody really ever knew me primarily as a beer writer, but I wrote a lot of beer stories. But I was usually writing them through the lens of like social justice or agriculture, something with ecology. So if you can think about it from that perspective, that's also really important. And then know the people. Know who the business editor is. Know who the education. Are you working with a local college that's doing a brewing program? Pitch that to the education reporter, not necessarily the food reporter. That'll be good. Knowing who the players are beyond just journalists, knowing who else is influential in the community. You should be including on your press list all of your local represented officials. You should be including anybody who's involved in your Chamber of Commerce. Who else? Anybody, let's see. Anybody in business development. People who help with your financing. Any of those people. If you have a bank that you're getting financing from, they love to put up promotional stories about their successful clients. So that's part of that shared content. You're letting, your captive audience do the sharing for you. They love that stuff.
And I would even say from, from my seat, on the media list, I would put your local legislators on there. Like if you're doing something really cool and they catch on to it, they have media lists as well. They love publicity. They would love to come to your breweries, and they would love to, you're doing something really cool like the Apollonia or whatever, and you have local legislators, and maybe they pick it up. I would think, and like, oh, well, senator or assembly member such and such would like to come to your brewery and talk about this.
And then if you get those people, all the media will come. I was just at the Desmond for an event with Delgado And it was like, oh, people might come to this media event. And then Delgado came, and I was like, people are definitely going to come to this media event. I'm going to get tons of coverage.
They do. They get them there no matter what.
They do, yeah. So definitely include that. Also, like people in the Department of Ag. Anybody, the commissioner is a wonderful man and is always looking for places to go, gallivant and glamour puss and all that fun stuff. So make it look like they're out in the real world. Go ahead.
In Westchester County, we have a tourism board.
Yes.
Does New York State have?
Yes. It's their I Love New York, that's the tourism board. But definitely anybody, it's probably just like something very generic, like marketing at such and such. And even if you can't find like a specific person, just news at, whatever, chartersyracuse.com or whatever the spectrum in Syracuse is. Just those general news at whatever, business at whatever, food at whatever is really important because somebody actually reads those. And it's usually more than one person that's reading those, so it tends to get through the filter pretty well. Bless you. That's the most dainty sneeze.
I was trying not to let it fly on.
So definitely include those. And even if you don't have time to go find people specifically to start, just start there. And then they're going to respond. And then you'll be like, oh, that's that producer, that's that editor, that's whoever. And then you can add them in. Yeah, go ahead.
So I heard this help report it out thing.
I was going to bring that up. Yeah. Are you using it?
No, I just heard about it and I thought it was pretty cool. I just didn't know if it was regional or if it's nationwide.
Nationwide, international. So yeah, HARO, help a reporter out. It's just HARO.com, I think. That's now owned by a company called Cision, and Cision is like a news monitoring agency. It's incredibly expensive. I would not recommend anybody take part in that part of it, but you can find any journalist anywhere through it. But the help a reporter out thing is basically you get 3 emails a day, and it's just, and it's a lot. It's like 30 to 50, sometimes more. I'm a journalist, I'm looking for this. I'm a journalist, I'm looking for this story. Kind of like what John does for you. But anybody can access it. And, they're usually time sensitive, like anywhere from 2 days to a week that you have to respond. But it could be like, I've seen all sorts of stuff on there. Men's Health, looking for, interesting new stouts for Christmas. If you're launching a beer subscription service, doing anything like that, those are great places to promote. And then keep it short. This is who I am. This is our brewery. This is what we're doing. Here's the assets. And a lot of times they won't actually respond to you. You just have to have a Google alert if you don't have a Google alert up for your brewery yet, and you can find it that way. And then search. Google alerts don't pick up everything, so going into the news tab of Google and searching that way usually will get you what you need. But yeah, HARO. I'm glad you brought that up. That's a good one. I read it 3 times a day. Yeah.
Just while we're on that, as far as resource of finding people to connect with, I just want to mention for anyone that doesn't already know in the room that our state association has a list on your website that we all have access to if you have a login, right, for legal contacts.
We have some, yes.
It's not exhaustive, but
no.
that it's a jumping off point,
Yep.
and it's a nice service. It's offered. Sorry to benefit.
If you only have 15 minutes that you can dedicate to building a media list, just make a list of the news outlets in your immediate area. And just go onto their contact us page and just put those very generic and start there. Because those actually do work really well. They're not great for pitching, but they're great for sending out your media advisories and your press releases and following up. So that's a great place to start. And then you just slowly build from there. And keep it in a spreadsheet. Don't do a doc. Do a spreadsheet because then it's easier to manipulate and pull things from it and copy and paste. Go ahead.
Not a question, but just a comment.
Yeah.
Because I work in the social media marketing side primarily, but I also work in the media. And the amount of times in the media that I've looked into people's social media to determine what I cover is obviously skewed a little bit because I'm in social media, but that's where I look. If there's a brewery that keeps popping up, that keeps tagging a media organization in a relevant way, and their website, social media, are well updated, they have great images, like I'm much more likely to feature them because it makes my job easier.
Right.
So anytime you can do that, like increase your digital presence in any way, make journalists or the media's jobs easier,
Mhm.
you're more likely to be featured.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The easier it is for journalists to cover your story, the more likely it is to be covered. So, no stream of consciousness writing, don't do that. Complete sentences are good. Having somebody, if you can, just kind of double check it before you send anything. But yeah, tagging people on social media is really big. It's a little frustrating sometimes. Like, generally, if you're sending it to our email address, we're getting it. I'm sure not everyone is as big of an asshole as me when they actually respond, but they usually are getting it, and to then hit them on Twitter and on Facebook and on Instagram can be a little, it's like, okay, I got your message. Sorry, I'm a little busy right now. But, tagging them, you don't have to send them a message, but if you tag them on things that you're trying to promote related to it, that can be helpful. Just give them a little nudge because sometimes we need it. But yeah, to your point, so you work in social media. What do you use for your content planning? Do you use Contently or anything like that?
I use Later.
Okay. And so will that allow you to kind of pre-program your hashtags? Right. So that can save a lot of time. So pay, everything's an expense. Everything's a write-off. Spend the $14 a month to use something like that to save yourself a ton of time. Because it's really difficult. Maybe even semi-recently, maybe even 5 years ago, you could just do traditional media, earned media. Now everything's so integrated into social. And there's stuff too that I know a couple of media outlets that only do things for social that they could promote you on. So pay attention to those things too, and then pitch specifically for those things. Be really specific in what your goal is when you're talking to the media. I would for this segment, I think I'd be a great fit, or, for this video series on your Facebook page, we would be a great fit. Be very specific in your goals. Just make it less work for the media, because there's nobody in it anymore. Everyone's stressed out. Nobody's making any money, and the less work they have to do to make it happen, the more likely you are to be picked up. Yeah, we're all in the same boat. We're all comrades here. Yeah.
We got a few minutes left, so yeah, let's finish up with questions.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna chime in to Morgan, and I can share space too. You can Tumblr, by the way, for social media management if anybody wants to. But you can pick up RSS feeds
Yeah.
on there. So I have the publications that
Right.
I'm gonna pay attention to, which is really nice, and then you can kind of see an overview of what's going on. But I was gonna say, so I'm a business journalist. I'm a beer business journalist.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't write a lot of feature. Please don't send me your press releases. I'll do any of that stuff.
Mhm.
I get a lot of them, but there's the North American Guild of Beer Writers.
Yes. And they do, yeah.
We're all on Twitter. If anybody wants to look, you can just see everybody who. Sorry if I'm exposing it, but I don't think my journalist friends would care because as long as they're getting quality work. But you can see who follows that Twitter feed that's public. It's
Mhm.
public knowledge, and there's a lot of really great journalists on there that you can just look at their Twitter feed and find out who might be in your area or you're in the woods. And we talk in circles and we source, things from each other all the time. And so I know chatter amongst people. I hear these people are really great to work with and they're always good with information. It's just nice.
Yeah, and a lot of times, those private groups, if we need a source last minute, then we'll ask somebody like that, and they'll come up. So, yeah, don't be afraid to, hack the system a little bit. Make the time. It can be the bell curve of learning those hacks and those systems. At first it takes a lot, but it ultimately pays off in dividends. It's hugely, influential on your success in media relations and marketing. But the beer writers guild, there's a couple of them.
There's a couple of them. Brian and Kate lead up the North American one, which is it's a substantial. It's not gigantic like a guild or something, but or like a state guild, but there's quite a few people in there, and you know, I would say the business folks were always trying to get sources, so
Yeah.
it's not like a whole piece about your company, but if you don't mind giving a comment about like current events or something like that, it's a nice like backlink.
Yeah, I mean, a great example, I just put a client, I mean, it's a big company, it's like a $500 million company, but they didn't really ever do a lot of media, but they were able to work into a trends piece on the Wall Street Journal. And so maybe they were 1/9 of the story, right? But that earned media return on investment was tremendous for them, like hundreds of thousands of dollars. So yeah, I mean, you never know where you're gonna find somebody. And also, like, be lofty. Like, you can pitch to the Wall Street Journal. Just because you're a regional brewery doesn't mean shit. Pitch to the Wall Street Journal. Go ahead.
I'll say that earned media, weird place we got some was, we had an expansion we were going through. We worked with firms that were way outside of the scope of what we were doing. And, you know, they wanted to do the fun brewery because it was local and whatever, but, you know, we got trade publication coverage. We were in their yearly thing. So, like, I always say, like, just, like we were saying, just now, like, should put moving. Like,
Yeah.
we reached out to, you know, people that don't normally do direct sales and said, hey, we want to work with you because you're local. I know you sell $1 trillion of boilers or whatever, but I'm a little brewery, can we talk?
Right. And you bring up the really great point of trade publications. Trade publications and economic development organizations usually have a publication as well. And they actually have money to pay really great writers to write really great things. And most of that is public. Like, you don't have to subscribe to it to get it. It's not behind a paywall. So don't be afraid to put those people on your list too. And it's really hard. There's so many different outlets. And now it seems like there's more than ever because social media is a whole different thing, right? So don't get overwhelmed, but don't be afraid to just add whatever you find on there. And then eventually if somebody unsubscribes or says, don't contact me anymore, then you take them off. Don't burn that bridge. But yeah, trade publications, economic development organizations, they usually have a good outlet for journalism. And then you can use that to build your media, your profile, your portfolio essentially of all the places that you've been published to be like, yo, we're legit. Like, it's not just about we make great beer, but also people like us and like to write about us. And that's great. It all builds on itself. Was there another question? No, perfect.
Since you're filling in for John, you have to end with the question that he always asks people on his latest podcast.
I don't even know. What is he asking these
Green door
days?
question?
The green door?
Green door. I was.
I'll give you the lead in.
Yeah,
So,
please.
My wife and I, during COVID, started rewatching A Good Place, if you're familiar with that show.
Oh, right. He's in a documentary that everybody called him out on before he was a beer journalist. Do you know this? Do you know this story? With John Holm?
I know the documentary he
It
was
was
just
somebody
in
got
about
murdered,
the.
right, or something, or no? Oh.
So
That was recent.
At the end of the show, there's this concept called the green door, and you can go if you can be anywhere or any place with anyone, go through this door and you're there. But he spins and says, if you could be at any pub anywhere in the world with anyone you wanted to be with, who would you be with? So you have to ask for that, right? And then she has to think about it for a second.
You just did ask Deanna that. Did John never ask you that question?
He's-
John never asked you that question?
No, the questions that John asked me are a little bit less PG than that. But
And the answer is game, right? So
my pub, I'd be probably at the Long Hall in Dublin.
No.
Or there was a pub in Spain once where I lost my shoes.
All right.
And that's the last thing I remember there. So
some
maybe that
people said
one.
they want to be at 3:50.
Actually, I bring that back. You know where I go? I would bring Mahar's back. Mahar's in Albany.
Pub, like a bar. It's like a small, like a.
It was like I was in Scotland once, and some random old dude came up and heard my accent. He's like, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Albany, New York." And he's like, "Oh, Mahar's."
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
Who would you be there with?
Paul Leone.
Oh yeah, that's why she's the best. Yeah, always. Yeah. There's a bar in Palmyra, New York called Mickey's that I've been going to since I was 5 years old, and my dad still, who's 82, goes there every Saturday for 2 beers, and he's been there since he was 18, so it was like 1958. He's been going there, whatever. So I have a beer with him every once in a while on Saturday at Mickey's. That's my place.
There's anything that came from Palmyra that wasn't Mormon?
You know Palmyra, New York?
Yeah,
Oh my
Mormons.
God. Yeah, Mormons. That's right. That's where they really. Yes, exactly right. The
Did
Mormons.
anybody ever go to Margie's in Troy? No. Where you could still smoke No, nobody. Okay, that would be great too. No, but we'll leave it on a John Hall note. He is in the document. It's on Netflix, right?
Yeah, he's in it. Yeah,
About
it's random. So
very random. He makes a cameo on a documentary about a hitchhiker that killed people with hatchets.
that's right. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I do not.
Yeah.
There's
So.
like a young guy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
John and his bow ties.
People are discovering John and his bow ties. So yeah. So those that know John, you know John. Those that don't know John, like try to really, you should look him up because he's just a great human being, and I miss his bow tie, and I'm sorry that I had to sit here in his place, but thank you.
Thank you.
For your amazingness and coming
Yeah, hopefully
here.
it was
And
helpful.
no, you have such great information. So thank you.
Thanks. No problem.